The rain had just stopped when Sarah stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled fresh, washed clean, as if the city itself had taken a deep breath. Below her, the street glistened with puddles reflecting broken lights. She wrapped her shawl tighter around herself and closed her eyes for a moment. Some memories return quietly, without warning, and when they do, they bring both warmth and ache. This was one of those moments. Sarah was not someone who believed in dramatic love stories. She believed in steady emotions, in feelings that grew slowly and stayed strong. She had seen too many people promise forever and disappear the next day. That was why she was careful with her heart. She smiled easily, but she trusted rarely, for life was simple. Work during the day, long walks in the evening, and books at night. She found comfort in routine. Love, she thought, would only enter her life if it fit gently into that routine, not if it shattered everything. Sarah, Ion entered her life on an ordinary afternoon. There was no thunder, no instant spark. He was standing in line at a small coffee shop, struggling with his order, clearly nervous. Sarah noticed him because he apologized 3 times to the barista and smiled in embarrassment. It was such a small thing, but it made her smile. When it was her turn to order, Ion turned around and said, "I think I complicated that way too much." She laughed softly and replied, "At least you tried." That was it. Just a few words. But sometimes beginnings don't announce themselves. They started seeing each other at the same cafe almost every day. Slowly, conversations replaced polite nods. Ion talked about his work, his family, and his fear of failing at things he cared about. Sarah listened. She was good at listening. In return, she shared her thoughts about life, about how silence could be comforting, about how emotions should be handled with care. Ion was different from anyone she had known. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He was honest about his flaws. "I don't always know the right thing to say," he once admitted, "but I always mean what I say." That honesty slowly built trust. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They began walking together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they walked in silence, and it never felt awkward. Sarah realized that she looked forward to those walks more than anything else in her day. One evening, as the sun set in shades of orange and pink, Ion stopped walking and looked at her. "I don't want to rush anything," he said carefully, "but I feel something real here." Sarah felt her heart beat faster, but she didn't panic. She nodded and said, "So do I." Their relationship grew gently. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. Sarah's love showed itself in small ways. A message asking if she had eaten, a quiet phone call late at night, a warm smile after a long day. Sarah felt safe, and that safety meant everything to her. But life rarely stays simple for long. Ion began to change, not suddenly, but slowly. He became quieter, more distracted. His messages grew shorter. His calls became less frequent. When Sarah asked, he said work was stressful. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. Still, doubt crept in quietly. Sarah noticed how he avoided certain questions, how he changed the subject when she spoke about the future. She told herself not to love, she reminded herself, requires patience. The next day, she asked Ion to meet her. They sat on a bench near the park where they used to walk. The air felt heavy. "I need honesty," Sarah said softly. "Even if it hurts." Ion looked down. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he spoke. He admitted that he was confused, unsure of what he wanted, afraid of commitment. He said he cared about her, but he wasn't ready to give her what she deserved. Sarah listened quietly. Her heart ached, but she felt strangely calm. Sometimes, the truth hurts less than uncertainty. "I appreciate your honesty," she said after a long pause, "but I can't stay where I'm not chosen." That was the moment they let each other go. The days after were difficult. Sarah felt the absence everywhere, in the cafe, on the walking path, in her quiet evenings. She cried when she needed to. She healed slowly. Months passed. Life settled again. One evening, after a long day, Sarah returned to the same cafe. As she stood in line, she heard a familiar voice behind her. It was Ion. They looked at each other, surprised but calm. Time had softened the pain. They talked briefly, kindly. There was no regret in Sarah's heart, only gratitude. Some loves are not meant to last forever, but they stay with you in other ways. They teach you what you deserve, what you should never accept, and how strong you can be. As Sarah stepped outside, the rain began again. She smiled, knowing that love hadn't failed her. It had simply guided her forward. Because sometimes, love doesn't stay in your life, it stays in your growth.